So hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. We are the team Climate Optimist, and this is a weekly newsletter sharing positive stories about climate change. Just as a quick introduction to the team, my name is Karthik. I'm from the Raw School of Business, and I'm joined here by Dave, who's also with me in the Raw School of Business. We both are passionate about climate change. We come from different business backgrounds, and we have worked on multiple teams together and bring diverse skill sets. So for example, on the Climate Optimist, I look at the content of the newsletter itself, whereas Dave looks at the marketing and the strategy piece of it for now. Moving forward, why did we start the Climate Optimist? So whenever we look at news, whenever it's coming related to climate change, we always see what's there on the left. So it's always negative news, code red for humanity. You can imagine a polar bear floating in an ice somewhere in the Antarctic. It's usually negative news, and the positive stories don't come to the fore. 7 in 10 Americans have some sort of news fatigue, and research has shown that if you give them positive news, not only they are motivated, but they also care more about the issue at hand. At the same time, there are big corporations like Walmart. Yeah.
The slide is not coming up correctly.
Oh.
We're just seeing a mix of 2 slides if you want to try advancing.
What do you see now?
We see like the Google Slides interface. Yeah, maybe just try one more time.
Can you see it now? Okay,
yeah.
So maybe I can keep it like this so that it's easier to just navigate.
Sure.
Okay. Where did you lose me? Yeah, so I was saying, whenever we talk about climate change, it's usually negative news, the stuff that you see on the left. Whereas there are big corporations which are trying to fight climate change as well. So for example, just to give you a statistic, Walmart has something called as a Project Gigaton, where they aim to bring down carbon by 1 gigaton by the end of the decade. That is equivalent to the goal of Africa as a nation. Africa has 1.2 billion people. So through the Climate Optimist, we want to target business professionals and business students who have a larger role to play in terms of fight against climate change. So introducing the Climate Optimist. The Climate Optimist is a weekly newsletter. It's bite-sized. So every newsletter is just 2 stories, 250 words each. It can be read within 5 minutes. It's business focused. And more importantly, it has an optimistic approach. Some of the screenshots that you can see on the right. So we usually cover, each newsletter has a theme. So we would usually cover, let's say, what's happening in the aviation space, what's happening in the agriculture space. Last week, we had an edition on fertilizers. This week, it's going to be on crypto. So every week has a theme, and we talk about what are the positive stories and positive actions being taken by corporations, big and small startups alike, on how to combat climate change. Of course, I'm sure you're thinking that there are multiple such newsletters out there in the market. What is different about the Climate Optimist? I would say I would try to rank it on 2 different parameters. One is the length of stories itself. And 2, what's the relevance to working professionals when it comes to news about climate change? So there's obviously the morning brews of the world, which share bite-sized stories, but don't necessarily cover climate change or climate-related stories. On the other hand, there's stuff like Bloomberg Green, which is though focused towards climate professionals and business professionals more generally, but it's not bite-sized. It's very long articles, usually about 1,000 words, and no one wants to read 1,000-word articles. So the Climate Optimist wants, as I said before, it wants to share bite-sized stories about positive change that's happening and hopefully inspire action. We have started this process a while back. I think we launched sometime in October, and our first edition was all over the place. I actually have the screenshot from our first edition when it came out. The images didn't load. The text was all compressed. We couldn't see what was happening. It was absolutely horrible, but we at least made a start. Before IiA started, we were still doing everything through Gmail. We figured out how to put images which would dynamically render as well as text which would dynamically render, but we had no web presence, no feedback mechanism. We are starting to bring up themes, but post IiA, we have had the chance to look at feedback. We moved on to a sort of network emailing platform where we can see what are our users, how many times are they opening the edition, which is the edition that they're liking. And we are becoming more analytics driven and more multi-platform approach post IiA. So what has been the impact so far? We have published 25 issues so far. We have 341 subscribers. We have a 100% delivery rate, which means like no one sending it to spam or deleting it automatically, and then 50% open rate, which is to give you a benchmark compared to the industry average. I would say Morning Brew is considered like the best in the industry, and they have a 40% open rate. So I think we are trying to make people more aware through this. And the feedback that we have gotten from working professionals, business students, they really enjoyed reading the newsletter and the bite-sized information that it's providing. So why innovation in action? We obviously need support. We feel this is just the beginning of the journey. We obviously need the monetary support to not upgrade the tech stack. We want to be able to do A/B testing. We want mentorship. So your feedback, the feedback that we have received from other previous coaches, and of course, outreach. IiA, Erin especially, has been extremely helpful in spreading the word whenever possible. So we want that support going forward as well. So what's our vision for the future? I want to take the time to talk about what do we want to do next. So today it's a newsletter, but in 6 months, we want to make it multi-platform. We want to expand to YouTube, have a podcast, get some marketing referral programs. 12 months. So currently we focus on stories from US and India because I'm from India and Dave as well. But we want to have a global reach. I think climate change is a global problem, and we want to cover regional stories which will be relevant to all professionals. And finally, in the end, we want to start benchmarking companies. This is information for innovators, information for investors. How do one companies compare to other companies? And we want to be able to get to that. Finally, there are some internal and external risks. And I know I'm running out of time. I'll be more than happy to cover it if questions arise. Thank you so much for your time.
Woohoo! Panel, who would like to start? Elizabeth, you're ready.
What are some of the risks that your company is facing?
I'm so glad you asked. So I would broadly classify into internal and external risks. So of course, there's the question of project continuity. We are currently looking to expand the team, and we both are absolutely committed to the cause. We both are passionate about climate change. Content verification, I think we are a small newsletter right now. So to be able to get content from verified sources, like no one's going to give us actual quotes. So we try our best to rely on Bloomberg or Wall Street Journal or BBC or wherever at least there's general consensus that the content is verified. External risks, something that's always top of our mind is media copyright. So we use images in our newsletters. We are using pixels and those community sourced images, but that's always a question mark. And yeah, that's basically the major ones that I would highlight. Thanks for the question, Elizabeth.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but what's the business model? Is this a paid newsletter? Like, do you pay for it? How does it, what are the
It's not.
You? Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Sarika. It's not a paid newsletter. The business right now, the goal is to spread awareness. We are not focused on generating revenue or anything. To be honest, it started off as we realized both as business students, we are in our final year, realized both as business students that not just us, but our entire class is vastly unaware about climate change and its impact to society. To give you a small number, I think by 2030, we need to cut our emissions by 50% to have a 50% chance of tackling, like keeping the goals within the 2 degrees Celsius. If you just think about it, that's just such a big ask, right? And we just started this, like we just sent out our first newsletter to our friends and see what the reaction was. And that's the goal. We want to spread awareness. But of course, like any other newsletter, if we have to keep it sustainable, we are not looking to make any profits. It would be driven by marketing and maybe paid company profiles and eventually company benchmarking and selling benchmarking reports to investors.
Great, thanks. Just a couple of feedback and suggestions. So you both are raw students. Do you know Sam Buck?
Yeah, I've spoken to him.
Okay, I know he was working on something similar, so maybe just lessons learned from what he did. I don't know if he's continuing with that. So more of, not so much someone else is doing this, but maybe you can learn something from him.
Yeah.
And then, so climate change, like obvious problem, right? Like you don't have to spend that much time talking about why this is a problem, but it might be worth, because the solution, it sounds like the problem you're trying to solve is that there's not enough information for people who want to do, like who want to know about this and want to take action. And so maybe setting up the problem in a way that talks about why there's a need for that, like why that's not happening right now would be helpful.
Yeah, and if I can comment on that very quickly. So Sam Buck has been extremely helpful. I spoke to him before we started this. I spoke to him twice about his initiative, and he has been super helpful. As far as, so maybe I did not do a good enough job in explaining the problem, but we specifically want to target working professionals and not individuals to take action. I think there's enough written about what individuals can do, right? Turn off your electricity, use public transport, eat less red meat, and eat more vegetables, all that thing. So we all know as individuals like what we need to do. I think there's the impact that this organizations or companies can have. The example of Walmart. Walmart has a goal to remove carbon emissions by 1 gigaton. Africa has an equivalent goal. I know for sure that I can't reach 100 million people in Africa through this newsletter, but I can surely reach 10% of the people in Walmart who can take action. So that's the goal, that we want to bring awareness. And those, we spoke to working professionals, a lot of them initially when we were doing our research. And we spoke to them just to figure out what is it that they are looking for in a newsletter like this. And it essentially came down to like bite-sized information, which is talking about what is happening in our industry and where are people taking action, so that they can get ideas about their day-to-day life and what can they do in their day-to-day business operations. Hopefully that addresses. It was just a comment. I know there wasn't a question, but I appreciate the feedback.
No, thank you. That's helpful.
So I have a lot of questions about newsletters. I was also involved in making one in Ann Arbor when I was in school. But I think my question is a little bit on the, and maybe it's a comment, but on the content of a newsletter like this. I think anytime that there's corporate sustainability things shared, it's often difficult to verify, is this an actual good effort towards, mitigating climate effects, or is this just greenwashing? And when you are highlighting cases of this, like how do you, maybe this is back to your risks about content generation and using these sources as well. Like maybe I may have a lot of thoughts on this, but how do you kind of verify that what you're purporting as climate successes are actual successes that are going on, and that people can trust you in what you're doing? Absolutely,
great question. So one is, I would say, one, of course, to use external resources to verify the content. So as I said, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. So these are one, that's the first primary source. Second, of course, is the company website. The company, of course, will have a lot more greenwashing than independent news providers. So there's that. And the third is like nonprofits like CDP, which is the Climate Disclosure Project, where companies are voluntarily giving their climate disclosures, and it's on a similar scale. So we at least know all companies are on a similar scale, and we can compare and share the information. You're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of greenwashing happening in this industry. But at the same time, right now, we are looking at not analyzing companies as a whole. We both have a lot to learn in this space as well, because before we can analyze companies as a whole. Right now, we talk about initiatives like Project Gigaton is an initiative within the larger ESG goals. It's part of environment, and within environment is just one part of sustainability. So right now, we are talking about initiatives within the company, which of course, we have no way of verifying how much progress those initiatives have made, except to take it from, so we try to always take it from annual reports, which we know would be audited in some format, or at least they will have some way of sharing the truth in as much way possible as they should. But that's where we are, and we recognize that there's a need for more content verification. If you have any ideas on how to make it better, I would be happy to.
Happy to connect with you guys afterwards. That sounds great.
Awesome.
Ian, did you just have the one question? Anything else you want to follow up with?
Too many questions.
Okay, fair. Any other last questions, comments, thoughts?
I do have a question. Can you go back and talk a little bit more about your team, but who else do you need to add to your team to get to the goals that you have?
Yeah, so right now it's me and Dave. I mostly look at the content side of things, whereas Dave looks at the marketing side of things. We eventually want to, again, just to our eventual goal of, to Ian's point as well, we want to get more towards working professionals as much as possible, and which requires a significant amount of research. So for example, again, giving the example from last week, we were talking about fertilizers, and we sat down to analyze top 3 companies of which manufacture fertilizers. That's a significant amount of research, which right now, along with our MBA program, we are doing as much as we can, but more hands on deck would always help. So that's on the content side of things. And of course, getting more focus towards marketing to working professionals, that would be the second piece as well.
If I have a quick moment, just about continued your user discovery process to date and what you envision for reader or user discovery going forward.
Yeah, so we did speak to a lot of people. And I think I showed you the newsletter right now, the 4 minutes today, which is 2 stories themed. It's usually after a particular industry, 2 stories, 250 words or less. That's not how we started. When we started, it was typically around 3 or 4 stories. It was 600 words. It was all over the place. And people didn't really want to read it, those long people. And even though it was weekly, people didn't really want to read it. We sat down, we sought feedback from a lot of different people and basically asked them, like, what is it that you're looking for in a newsletter? Eventually, what we got to was people are looking for bite-sized stories. So that's why it came down to 250 words. People don't want to spend more than 5 minutes a week. And that's also very difficult to get them interested in climate change. So that's where we are today. And going forward, because it's a newsletter, it's going out weekly, we can test out small things every week. So for example, right now we are testing if Monday morning, 10 o'clock is the best time to send it, or Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. is the best time to send it. We are in the middle of trying that right now. And there are small experiments about what is it that users are liking. So we'll share a story which was related to climate tech, not just climate change, but climate tech. And we asked the user, are you interested in that? And we suddenly saw an uptick in like, okay, people are really interested in reading more about it. So we do, the good thing for us is that we have an iterative process, and every week we can seek feedback from users, and people have been super supportive at Ross to actually, not just Ross, but others as well, to help us out along our journey.